Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement Café for January. And this is our very first January Movement Cafe. We've done movement cafes this is our third year doing these cafes, which is really exciting. And this year we added a January cafe because we wanted to make sure to get the resolutions, annual conferences equipped with resolutions, because those deadlines for resolutions to bring to your annual conference, they start in January. And so we want to make sure to get our resolutions out there. We have model resolutions to share today. We are so glad you're here to share them with. Great turnout today. So excited to see that. And we're going to be walking through the resolutions. We're going to be hearing from different speakers with different experience in working with model resolutions in the conference. And the first person that I want to introduce today, who will be bringing us kind of a big picture experience, she is the convener of the annual conference organizing team for the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement. Dr. Karen McElfish is a Global Ministries Earthkeeper. Her home conference is the Virginia Conference, where she serves as the United Women in Faith president and is a member of the Virginia Creation Justice Team and co-chair of the conference Legislative Network. She leads the annual conference organizing team, as I said, for the movement. And at this point, I'm just going to turn it over to her, where you can hear from her, and she's going to bring us this opening around what is model resolutions, how do we get here, and what do we do next? Go ahead, Karen.
Thanks, Rashenda. So I wanted to give you a little bit of history about how this process started. There were a number of us in the annual conference organizing team that came together in the fall of 2022. There were annual conferences that were being very successful about developing resolutions, presenting them at their annual conference and having them passed. And a number of us thought we really should provide model resolutions then to other annual conferences that wanted to do likewise. So some of the model resolutions that we looked at that point were ones that had already been submitted, but we also looked at whether there were some new annual model resolutions that annual conferences ought to be looking at based on the work that the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement team was doing. A number of those were passed through, actually many of them were passed by a number of annual conferences in 2023. And the other thing that we took advantage of was that because General Conference was delayed, it provided us with a second opportunity to submit resolutions to General Conference for passage. So a lot of the successful resolutions that passed at Annual Conference were then written for submission to General Conference, and most of those passed. In fact, I think all but one. So having a successful panel of resolutions that passed at General Conference that are now in our Book of Discipline and Book of Resolutions, we are now going back and looking at what resolutions could annual conferences submit based on those successful General Conference resolutions, reflecting the work that General Conference had done, affirming that work, and then extending that work to the annual conference level, committing to action at the annual conference level, and all the way down then to the local level, local church level. So in fall of 2025, we reconvened that working group to look at and revise the model resolutions that had already been submitted and some new resolutions that had been based on the work of the annual conferences and the work of General Conference. So those are now up on our website, resolutions for 2026. You'll find those on the UMCJM website under umcreationjustice.org, and you'll hear a little bit more about the specifics of those in a moment. But on the website, you'll see the wording of the resolution itself, as well as some information on the focus of the resolution, a summary of the resolution, and notes to help you discern whether this particular resolution would be of value and importance for your annual conference. Those resolutions vary from being very broad affirmations, for example, of things that happened at General Conference, to very in-depth action-oriented resolutions. And so you'll need to discern whether your annual conference is at a point where they could do something that's very in-depth and action-oriented, or whether they need maybe more of a starting point or buy-in resolution that would help to get the process started. These model resolutions are intended to be adapted. Yes, you could take them whole cloth, but look at the resolution and determine what's your own context at your annual conference. What is your annual conference ready for? Again, maybe it's time to do more of a starting point or buy-in resolution, and then develop a timeline to say, okay, we'll submit that this year, it'll get passed this year, and then next year we'll submit something that's more action-oriented or in-depth. Some of the model resolutions are very similar one to the next, but go into more or less detail. And again, that's where that buy-in or starting point may be helpful. One example of a model resolution was developed in conjunction between a creation justice or creation care team and their bishop. And as you move forward, you may want to be looking at working with the bishop or working with someone else in your annual conference office to develop that resolution. It's going to be important to know what are the deadlines for submission and what is the submission process. There are some annual conferences for which resolutions have to be submitted already by the end of January, and others where February or March will be your deadlines. So it's important to know what those are. And be in contact with the conference office as need be to help you through that process. Some of those resolutions will have to go to a committee before they are submitted to the whole body at annual conference. You may need to be able to speak to that committee then to support your resolution or to help adapt that resolution if need be, if there's some changes or modifications that need to be made. As you're moving forward, it's going to be important to have a team that works together to write and present that model resolution or that resolution in general. And you'll also want to identify who are your allies, who can you work with. For example, United Women in Faith with our Just Energy for All campaign. You may pick a resolution that would be very akin to that campaign and would seek out support from them as an ally. You might also want to consider trustees or finance, church and society. You want to look to see where your resources are so you're not doing this siloed. Develop some supporting materials. Plan for passage using things like flyers or information sheets. You may want to have a table or a booth at annual conference where you can share this information in anticipation of the resolution coming to the floor. And again, also at your allies tables, if United Women in Faith, for example, has a table, to have information on the resolution there. Be prepared to speak to the resolution, both to the committee, if your committee is part of the process, and also on the floor of annual conference. And then when you're successful, be ready to share that success with the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement so that that can go up on our website. That inspires other annual conferences to action. And you'll find on our website now already, there are a number of model resolutions or resolutions that have passed that could serve as model resolutions for you as you're moving forward. So I hope that's helpful as you're discerning the resolution process at your annual conference, and to great success.
Oh, that's awesome, Karen. Thank you. And I think I mentioned that the model resolutions have a couple of segments. They have the whereas clauses, and they have the therefore. So the therefore is the action part, and the whereas are sort of why. Why do we even need this? And the Karen, I really appreciate you're talking about that action, that accountability, that piece that gets it done. But the whereas they can be more flexible. The whereas sections of these resolutions can be a bit heavy for the models. But what's good about that is that it gives you talking points and it helps you communicate why this is urgent and important. And so even if your conference says, well, we don't want all that whereas stuff, keep it and present it and help people understand that, and that hopefully will help you out. The next I want to introduce Reverend Sharon Delgado. Reverend Sharon Delgado is convener for Fossil Free UMC and on the coordinating team for the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement. Her home conference is California, Nevada. She's author, speaker, all those things, theologian, and her book, Love in a Time of Climate Change, Honoring Creation and Establishing Justice, has come out in its revised edition. I had the opportunity to review it, and so that's a link there. And she's going to kind of talk about this again. What's the whereas sections? This is like a whole book on whereas section. It is what we're doing and why we need to do it. And she's got it absolutely down, readable, shareable, studyable, and I highly recommend it. So I'm going to turn it over at this point to Sharon. Go ahead, Sharon.
Thank you, Rashinda. And really nice to have everybody here. Really glad to be a part of this gathering and working on resolutions. I've been doing this for a little bit of time and have been working on resolutions from before I even got involved with the Movement Cafe. So I really think it's an important thing that we're talking about here today. Annual conference resolutions, general conference resolutions, why we even write them up and put them out there and hope that they're passed and do the footwork to try and get them passed. And that's, I'm going to explain to you why I think that's important. But anyway, as Rashinda was saying, the revised edition of Love in a Time of Climate Change, Honoring Creation, Establishing Justice, was released by Fortress Press just last week. The first edition was published in 2017. So that's 9 years ago. That's a long time ago now, or 10 years. And the book is a Wesleyan approach to climate change. It's now been brought up to date. It's been revised, and the climate science has been updated. The conversations that are taking place about climate change, because they've expanded, and many of them are new conversations. The overview of the climate justice movement has been expanded. There are new reflections on hope in the preface. A deepening hope with what's going on. We really need to develop hope as a spiritual virtue. And it also has a process of discernment based on scripture, tradition, reason, and experience. In fact, that's the structure of the book. And so it's Wesleyan and more. So it's about how to love God and our neighbors by honoring creation and establishing justice in this time of climate change. So that's my book. And because my book was just released, I've been asked to speak about how important it is to have reliable and faithful information, which I assume that means because my book has reliable and faithful information, as I believe it does. We need to have that kind of information as we build our teams and as we speak to other people about our resolutions, and maybe we even speak to others on the floor of annual conference. For sure, we need to find someone to convince to do that if we don't feel up to it ourselves. And the information in this book, and hopefully in the background of the resolutions, can help you to do that. So why do we put forth annual conference legislation? Sometimes it's because there's an urgent need for our church to take a stand or to take action in order to be faithful. And sometimes that action is an urgent need, like today when we're focused on creation justice. It's important for us to take faithful action together on these issues that a lot of people aren't talking about. They're really not in the foreground of a lot of people's minds. But putting these kinds of resolutions together and following through with them is a way of in a way, forcing the conversation, at least raising awareness about the conversation. And by passing those resolutions, it clarifies who we are, where we stand as an annual conference, and as United Methodists. So it is a way of honoring creation and seeking to establish justice for our neighbors near and far, human and other than human, and present and future generations of neighbors. So this is where I would ask Don if you would post the first of the, oh, I'm sorry, you probably already posted something about the book. Now, I would like it to have be posted how we can put forward a strong annual conference resolution and get it passed. So I'm going to talk about a few of the basics. The resolution needs to be clear in what it's calling for and why. It needs a biblical and theological rationale. It needs to describe how the resolution will help. It'll help the stated need or problem that we're talking about. It needs clear instructions about who's going to carry out what is decided. Is the annual conference secretary going to write a letter to someone? That kind of thing. It needs clear and updated background information that supports the resolution and answers questions that can be anticipated. And it needs someone willing to present and on the floor of annual conference, and then someone to follow up after it's passed, so it doesn't just sit there. Kind of like what the United Creation Justice Movement did with the general conference resolutions that were passed, the petitions, because once you pass them, somebody has to follow up and make sure it's going in a direction that it was intended with the vote. And so that's what Karen was describing earlier. So my book, Love in a Time of Climate Change, does offer reliable and faithful information, and it can actually help with resolutions in a few ways. It offers a biblical and theological rationale in a variety of different ways for action on climate change and climate justice, and it does that from a Wesleyan perspective. And you can use it for other forms of environmental justice and creation justice issues. It updates the scientific information about climate change, its impacts, forecasts based on what actions we human beings take. My book highlights the calls by scientists to take urgent action now to phase out fossil fuels to prevent runaway climate change. And it talks about divestment from fossil fuels as one of many strategies it talks about. The book makes the case for seeking climate justice for those who are impacted most and who did the least to cause climate change and fossil fuel and other forms of pollution. It answers questions that people might not even know to ask about climate change, and it suggests actions, including actions that address the causes and the underlying values that perpetuate climate change and other harms. And I was thinking about it, and I'm not sure about whether an annual conference is ready for a particular resolution. If we really know that, I'm going to give you an example of a couple of annual conferences later when I talk about the divestment resolutions, because those are pretty challenging. And so I don't know that needs to be limiting. It depends on the people who are organizing it, and because we had someone really pushing and we were really surprised that it passed. But a particular resolution might be needed even if there's opposition. That's what I'm saying. It might not be everyone's priority and it could fail, but bringing up a topic in a way that people need to decide about gives everyone an opportunity to study and think about it, talk about it, pray about it. And the resolution process makes these issues and even difficult issues more visible and actionable because it calls on people to take a stand. So finally, by putting forward creation justice resolutions, we're actually helping to change the worldview and the perspective from the dominant paradigm. We're offering an alternative vision based on biblical and theological values and moral principles that clarify who we are and where we stand as a body. So it's a way to promote the well-being of people and the earth. It's a way to honor creation and seek to establish justice in this time.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharon. Okay, and we're going to hear more about divestment specifically, which is something that Sharon's really expert in knowing, has been navigating this territory for a while. My job next is to walk us through the resolutions for 2026. We got visual learners, auditory learners. I have a slideshow that'll just help us do that, but I'm going to be moving through them. It might be a little boring, hopefully not, because it's going to be great information. And the link I just posted, if you want to follow along on the website to see them, you're welcome to do so. I'm going to share my screen. And off we go. Okay, so these are the 2026 model resolutions from the United Methodist Christian Justice Movement that come also from United Methodist annual conferences and Fossil Free UMC. And there's my follow along link. So the first one is affirming church land use and the harmony of creation. It's in our book of resolutions, 1214. This resolution and its bulk passed at General Conference and is, as I said, in the book of resolutions. Its focus is sustainable practices for church land and grounds. This resolution asks church and conference trustees, green teams, and conference creation care justice teams to create a plan that will ensure all properties use sustainable land practices and supports healthy native soils, plants, pollinators, and gardens. And further, this resolution asks local church and conference teams to share what they learn with each other and for the annual conference to celebrate and showcase changes yearly during the annual conference. This is one of the more straightforward resolutions to pass. Most people understand, appreciate, and can get behind it. To support passage, look to the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement newsletter for inspiring examples of United Methodist Church green teams transforming their land with native plants, prayer gardens, produce gardens, and more. Number 2, affirming the formation of green teams and caretaker of God's creation coordinators in every conference. This meat of this as well passed at General Conference and you'll find it also mentioned and in the United Methodist Books of Discipline and the Book of Resolutions. So the focus here is ensuring annual conferences have people and teams in place and support for those people and teams. This resolution specifies that a person be named, appointed, and or hired to serve as the caretaker of God's creation coordinator for that annual conference, as well as offering an accountability date for when this must happen. Further, the annual conference should act to form a creation care and justice team at the conference level to support and serve alongside the caretaker, and that green teams be organized in local churches and throughout the conference. Note that this resolution fills 2 mandates from the General Conference, that there be a caretaker, and also it talks repeatedly of green teams. Our books do, and all in one resolution. It is simple in structure and can affirm the work in a straightforward vote. Number 3, creating a creation care justice team in the name of your annual conference. So this is to take action on creation care and justice legislation that passed with specific actions in the conference. The focus, creating a full conference level creation justice team task force formed in the traditional Methodist structure. So this is going to be very specific and help you think things through. This resolution came through an annual conference and passed based on the urgency of creation justice and the social principles of the United Methodist Church. The legislation invokes creation justice as a missional priority for the church. The resolution offers a structure and specifics for how that conference level team will be formed, mirroring United Methodist committee and team structures. It includes the caretaker of God's creation coordinator role and budgeting, as well as other specifics. So this, you should note the specifics in this resolution are helpful for those who might really want to think through what a team in their conference could look like and what a team might specifically need to be successful and how it can be structured within the conference itself. Number 4, strategic conference-wide electrification planning to support local churches and local church ministries. Passed at General Conference. In the United Methodist Book of Discipline, we're asked to do these things. Focus is to establish a detailed and actionable plan to decarbonize church buildings, and a sample audit is included. This resolution jumpstarts real energy transition activity to move from fossil fuels to clean energy in conference and local church buildings. The resolution asks church and conference green teams, as well as church and conference trustees, financial officers, building managers, and conference staff to contribute to and prioritize the effort, including having a plan and transparency via progress reports. So note, this resolution is designed to put into action the resolutions passed at General Conference to audit and electrify church buildings. This resolution may spark resistance from some, but may also bring hope to young Methodists who are frustrated by the slow movement toward electrification in the denomination. Number 5, affirming the 2024 General Conference call to action for the United Methodist Church to urgently transition to clean energy. Again, the core of this passed at General Conference, and this shows up in the United Methodist Book of Discipline and Resolutions. Focus. A call for a task force and urgent action in church and conference that includes calling on the General Secretary of the General Council on Finance and in Administration to act on General Conference legislation. What Sharon was talking about. We got to get this done. This resolution cites scripture, polity, the books of discipline and resolutions, social principles, and United Methodist energy policy to make the case that there must be action and accountability to define the path to achieve a clean energy transition in the church. The resolution names those accountable, including the conference treasurer, chief financial officer, conference and general counsel on finance and administration, conference trustees, and more. Note, the resolution holds those in positions of power in the United Methodist Church accountable to act according to the will of the General Conference. Number 6, affirming General Conference decisions about creation, care, and justice. Again, we're talking about stuff that passed at General Conference that appears in the books of discipline and resolutions. The focus here, bringing a concise list of United Methodist commitments to creation, care, and justice, updated in the 2024 books of discipline and resolutions, and bringing that before the annual conference. This resolution is a simple list of the primary creation, care, and justice legislation that passed by significant margins by the delegates of the last General Conference. The list is simple and well laid out so that members of the annual conference can easily read through what legislation got passed, what actions were taken, and then they, in their own annual conference, can vote to affirm those actions. Note, many people don't realize, just honestly don't realize how much creation, care, and justice featured in the last General Conference, nor what legislation was passed there. This straightforward resolution may spark important conversations. Though it does not specify action, the resolution is itself a resource for discipleship and further action on creation justice. Number 7, establishing priorities for creation, care, and justice in the annual conference is a resolution. Again, based on things that passed at General Conference, also based on the recent response by the Council of Bishops and the stuff that the legislation we're finding in the books of discipline and resolutions. The focus is actionable and named priorities for the conference. And in this case, specifying to achieve net zero, to establish a caretaker of God's creation coordinator, and to complete audits. This legislation establishes 3 priority areas for the annual conference to address as part of the United Methodist Council of Bishops' November 2025 response. The legislation includes a list of actionable steps and specifically calls for the support and leadership from the bishop, bishop's office, and the cabinet in addressing these 3 priorities. Note, this resolution was written by an annual conference in collaboration with the conference green team members and the bishop. So it's a wonderful example of the fruits of establishing dialogue to address the urgent need for creation, care, and justice. This resolution will need discernment for what your priorities are in your own annual conference context. Number 8, we're getting through them, folks. Affirming the net zero commitment to the boards, agencies, Council of Bishops, and General Conference of the United Methodist Church. Again, this net zero passed at General Conference and is in the books of discipline and resolutions. I think this is in resolutions. Focus is annual conference legislation to achieve net zero, including mechanisms of accountability to ensure net zero commitments are met. This legislation aligns with a commitment to achieve net zero from the Council of Bishops, 12 United Methodist boards and agencies, and other annual conferences and General Conference. Net zero is already a denominational commitment. The model resolution here adds accountability structures for the annual conference, calling for progress reports and leadership engagement. Note, with net zero established in United Methodism, this should be a straightforward resolution to pass. Offering this resolution will give you an opportunity to speak to why we must achieve net zero and what may be helpful alongside more complex model resolutions, such as establishing plans for electrification or naming a caretaker of God's creation. And you may want to tighten the 2050 goal to reflect the current science. Okay, so those were under the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement proper. There are three that are more specific to divestment. So the last three are annual conference divestment option 1. So this has passed in annual conferences and aligns with United Methodist social principles and legislation in both the books of discipline and resolutions. So focus is divestment, commitment, strategy, and implementation for annual conference funds. It adds a moral screen to screen out fossil fuels from all conference investments, similar to existing screens for tobacco, liquor, and gambling. And reminder, this has passed in annual conferences. This resolution sets an actionable path for the annual conference to identify companies whose core business involves production of coal, petroleum, and natural, which is methane gas, then seeks a redirection of those investment monies towards products and services that are in line with the United Methodist social principles. It includes the creation of a timeline and progress reports. Note, annual conferences have already passed divestment resolutions and divested from fossil fuels, woohoo! As have hundreds of other faith institutions. Westpath already offers high-performing divested funds that over the last 5 years have outperformed their fossil full counterparts. If conference financial leaders are reluctant to act on divestment, connecting them to experienced peers may help. Option 2 for annual conference divestment. Again, this has passed in annual conferences and it aligns with the social principles and other things in our books of discipline and resolution. Focus calls for a study of best investment practices for conference funds with a report and a proposal for the next annual conference. This resolution aims at divestment of the funds of the annual conference through a commitment to a process of study and shared discernment involving conference boards and agencies who may also have holdings to divest. Shared discernment through conferencing is the height of United Methodist tradition. This resolution sets out a process to include creation of a task force, who will serve on the task force, the work of the task force, and the final recommendation and report. Note, organizing a conference to hear from speakers can be powerful reassurance for faithful investing. Conversations in multiple conferences have been important and well received. This type of conferencing and study may be particularly important for conferences where there is significant fossil fuel revenue, such as where church lands have been leased for fracking and people are profiting from oil wells. Last one, tab number 11, urging fossil fuel divestment of all denominational funds of Westpath. Westpath already has expertise and success with fossil-free investments. They're already doing this. And it, again, aligns with our principles and what we've already got that's moving through and becoming part of our books of resolutions and discipline. Focus. A simple request to add fossil fuels to the investment screens of the United Methodist Church. Couldn't be more simple. This model resolution simply asks the annual conference to affirm that fossil fuels should be added to the existing investment screens of the United Methodist Church via paragraph 717 in the Book of Discipline. The church already screens out, it already does not invest in some kinds of industries, such as private prisons, liquor, and tobacco. This model resolution adds fossil fuels to that list. Note, passing this resolution does not mean that the whole denomination will then be required to divest from fossil fuels. Only General Conference can do that. but it makes the statement that the people of that annual conference want fossil fuels excluded from denominational investments. The UMC's investment agency, Westpath, holds and invests money on behalf of the denomination, including apportionments and pension and benefits funds. So that's that in a nutshell. There's more that we can say about it. There's a whole page with information, and you can reach out to myself or Karen or Sharon or anyone here to ask more questions. There's people in this room who have authored these model resolutions, and we can help connect you if you have questions. And sorry, I did warn you that would be a lot of slides, and I have to find my cursor again. There it is. Hurrah! And I want to keep us moving because we want to get to something a little more personable now. So I'm going to turn it over to Pat Watkins, who is here. And Pat, Pat Watkins is in the Virginia Conference, a Global Ministries Earthkeeper and retired missionary for God's creation, and the author of Climate Justice, A Call to Hope and Action. He's active in the work of creation justice in the denomination. And Pat, it's all yours. I'm going to turn it over. Looking forward to your presentation.
Okay, thanks, Rashinda. Well, folks, it's impossible for me to offer you a one-size-fits-all approach to presenting these resolutions, simply because all of your conferences are unique in their own wonderful and aggravating ways, and they have their own unique personalities. But I'm going to give you a few suggestions, and you can take them or leave them. All of you, I assume, have a passion for caring for God's creation, or you wouldn't be here. And I assume part of your passion is how to engage the church, either your local congregation, your annual conference, or the general church, or maybe even all of the above. Your passion will give you what you need to figure out how to best present these resolutions. In other words, you've got this. It may sound a bit complicated to you at this point, but you can do this. I have faith in you. If your conference does not already have a creation care team, now would be a great time to create one. You don't need anybody's permission to gather a group of like-minded people who are also passionate to form a team. Send emails out to clergy and laity, put notices in district and conference newsletters simply asking, does anybody out there care about God's creation? If so, email me. I guarantee there are people in your annual conference that care. So if you don't have a team, make one. And one of these resolutions you just heard is about making a creation care team for your conference. It is a great resolution to present to your conference, and I encourage you to do that. But you do not need to pass that resolution in order to form a team. You just have to get a bunch of great people together. Now, whether you have a team or not, it's very important when considering presenting any of these resolutions that you connect with various leaders in your conference that may be able to lend their support. Creation care is a priority of United Women in Faith. Karen mentioned that earlier. Connect with conference UWF leadership. They will be supportive. If your conference has a board of church and society, particularly given the fact that United Methodist social principles support all of these resolutions, they too can be a good ally. And speaking of the social principles, they can be a good reference when presenting these resolutions on the floor of your annual conference. So please check them out when you're preparing your talking points. Now, if you're able to get a list of the clergy and lay delegates from your conference that you elected to go to General Conference in 2024, they too might be helpful, because all but one of these creation care resolutions that were submitted to General Conference passed overwhelmingly. So more than likely, most or all of your delegates voted in favor of those resolutions. So they can be great to speak on your resolution from the floor of annual conference, particularly given their experience with General Conference. and the fact that most of them are annual conference leaders. Most annual conferences have one or more earth keepers. Global Ministries can help you identify who they are in your conference. They will be helpful too. It's also a good idea to contact the conference youth leadership. If they share your passion, they can also be good advocates. And since you know your annual conference far better than I do, there may be other connections that you can make that would help you. In fact, if you're thinking of some of those connections right now, put them in the chat so that they can be shared by all of us. I mentioned General Conference already. If you're presenting any of the resolutions that were passed at General Conference, a good argument would be to find the voting results of the committee that considered that particular resolution. It would be impressive, for example, to say, this resolution passed at General Conference with 90% in favor, for example. I think all 5 of our jurisdictions are now having Zoom meetings periodically for annual conference creation care leaders. If you're considering a particular resolution, and you attend your jurisdictional Zoom gathering, because there may be other annual conferences that have already passed that resolution or a similar one. It's always good to be able to say such and such annual conference passed this very resolution last year. You may find some of that information as well on the Creation Justice Movement website. Historically, as a church, we have not been very forthright in claiming creation care to be biblically, theologically, and traditionally a part of how we see ourselves as disciples of Jesus Christ. But we can change that, and these resolutions can help us make that change. We have biblical theology, Wesleyan theology, United Methodist social principles, bishops' documents and statements, a long litany of General Conference resolutions dating back to at least the 1980s, resources from UWF, Discipleship Ministries, and the Creation Justice Movement. We're not inventing something new here. We're asking the church to be the church we have been defining for a long time now. You are the change we need. You are defining what the church can and should look like long into the future. You've got this. I know you've got this. Thanks, Rashinda.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Pat. So that you can, Pat always inspires me. He always makes me feel like this is possible. We can do this. And he's not wrong. We got this. And in fact, the response from the bishops and the open letter to the bishops will hopefully be a bit of a game changer. Your bishop should be an ally to you. They're going to be juggling different things that they have to consider, yet there is, I believe, going to be some real support in that direction. The reality is we all have stories about how we've tried it, how we've succeeded at it, what we changed, how we discerned it, what kind of studies we did. And we want to share one of those stories coming from a Mountain Sky. Mary Beth Downing is with us. She is a Global Ministries Earth Keeper. She has served on her conference task force for a number of years, is a member of the coordinating team for the United Methodist Movement. And I'm going to pop it right over to you, Mary Beth, to share with us. Go ahead.
Thank you. And thank you, Pat. I think the first thing I would want to say, because Rashinda said, share the story. I don't know, we're not able to say, raise your hand if you have this, but my first question to you as an individual sitting in this is, do you have a task force yet? And if you don't have a task force, then I would say Pat Watkins is your resource. That's how we started. We met with, there was a handful of us, we met with him, and he helped us get the model of 6 working groups. The reason why that structure is so important for this work, and that's why resolutions are also so important, is it's overwhelming. This work is so much. And the beautiful part of the working groups is they're like placeholders. You have an annual conference working group, because that means you're going to have a statement there, legislation, local church engagement for helping those churches move forward, communication, so we're all working in the same place, UMW collaboration, so that we are continuing to work with our allies who are strong already, and then the movement to interface your conference into this bigger picture, because the resources that this umcreation.org offers are incredible. When we first started, the main thing we said to ourselves was, we are not reinventing the wheel. We will move forward with what is here. And this whole workshop is about, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Here are some resources and places for you to get started. As I look at where we're at, and as we're struggling, as we're wrestling, we're not struggling, we are wrestling with all of these things, it seems to me that the resolutions are, you have to figure out where you are at and what you are ready for. Just as Karen said, some of us are beginning, and I would say those are when you begin the affirmation. People do not know what happened at the General Conference. That's what a beautiful place to start. Then there's the middle level resolutions that we offer, and those are more like affirm what happened and then get specific, like Green Team, Creation Care, Task Force, those first steps. And then there is the third level of resolutions where you've got a task force, you've got some Green Team work going, you're naming things. What's the next thing you need to do? And what wrestling with these model resolutions helped us, there's a small group of us within Mountain Sky who are wrestling with this, is to realize where we are. And the next step that we are at is to work with the structural, systemic conference interface. Because it's like what often happens in conferences, and in ours is no exception, is we got silos and we're doing our work and we're running down the road or whatever. And what some of these resolutions call for is open that door and ask for systemic, structural relationship responsibility. And that, as Rashenda talked through some of the resolutions, call out names. The chair of the council of the board of trustees. Wow, that's a big ask. But what I think we are looking for is, if you don't ask, you're not going to receive. And what I heard Sharon say, if you don't ask, you don't start the conversation. And so you have to kind of figure out, what conversation is your conference ready for next? I love the fact, Sharon, when you said whether you win or lose, whether he passes or doesn't pass, you did the brave step of pushing the conversation forward. So I think that's really important. When I look at what we're doing, is 2 years ago, we passed the Green Team resolution. And we had a group of motivated people who also, without a resolution, move forward with the RAN grant. So you don't have to do stuff through resolutions. You can do stuff through passion and commitment. So we didn't do a resolution last year because our plates were plentiful. This year we are looking at resolutions, and we're looking at two. We are looking at the fossil free, going one way or the other. Are we doing the study, or are we doing the straight screening divestment? And we don't know yet. What we're figuring out, our next step is to talk to our bishop. Because what's become clear to us is, if we are going to do this structural interface next step, we have to have her support. We have to move forward where she sees the next step. Because if we've got her support, it will work, and we need to know what she's ready for. And every conference is different in what they're ready for. The other one that we're working on is the net zero, which is kind of a hodgepodge of what you've offered. We pulled things from different ones, and we're looking at net zero for the affirmation of what happened, so that we can move forward on the audits. We are within that resolution will be the naming of a coordinator, because that is officially what has to happen. And then the accountability piece, which I think is intimidating in these resolutions, but also is really important. Whether we get it or not, we have to ask for accountability. Who's going to be there? Who's going to sit at that table? So we're asking that there will be a report, and that there will be things in the newsletter, and that there will be an annual report to base on what are the next steps our conference needs to do to work to net zero, and where are we going and how are we getting there. And part of the beauty of that, which, because I was like, no, we can't do that, is that it gives us a room and a reason to sit at the table at annual conference and make a report, so that at every annual conference, the task force and the coordinator are up there in front of people saying, this is where we're at, this is where we're going. And I think that's really important, because in this moment, we really can't be siloed. We really can't be. We have to be moving forward. So anyway, the other thing that I would just say is there's some resources there, and one of them that I would highlight is that next steps. It's Rashenda wrote this, what to do in your annual conference, where to get started, and it's got a checklist of, just so you know, are you moving in the right direction? And there's a lot of resources of people who have done this work, so we're open. Send an email. We'll plug you into the person who knows more than we do, is what it is. So anyway, thank you so much. I think that's all I need to say.
Oh, that's awesome, Mary Beth. Thank you. We have about 10 minutes left before we're going to be moving into breakout rooms where you have an opportunity to speak with our presenters. And for this last piece, I'm going to turn it back over to Sharon Delgado, who's going to speak to the divestment resolutions. Go ahead, Sharon.
All right, so I am speaking to you about the divestment resolutions, both of them. And I have lots and lots and lots to say. Go to Fossil Free UMC, to the website, to read some of it, that not only myself, but also Rashenda and Pat and many others have written. We have talking points about why divestment and how divestment and all kinds of things. And I just last night posted both of those resolutions, the divestment resolutions. Well, the one on calling on Westpath to divest its funds from fossil fuels, and the one to the two for annual conferences. They're linked because they have the same background information. So there are two links there, and I think they're in the chat. Did they get put in the chat? Yes, and there's some other wonderful materials, great things that have been posted there, including a summit that we held in Cal, Nevada. But I want to tell you the history of that. I've got lots to say about divestment. And actually, I think I'll say one thing first, and that is that we were the first denomination in 1980 to put forward and to pass a resolution at General Conference calling on the church and the world, the nations of the world, to move away from fossil fuels and toward conservation and renewable energy. So we started in 1980. We led the way. All these years later, and so many, over 17,000 resolutions. I mean, institutions have divested from fossil fuels or gotten the process going, and over $40 trillion of assets. That many institutions with those many assets have divested from fossil fuels, and we are still laggards as a church as a whole. So ultimately, Fossil Free UMC is hoping that, and our mission is to get the United Methodist Church to divest throughout the denomination. But we also focus on Westpath because that's where our denominational funds are held. A lot of our annual conference foundations have their funds there. Our pastors' funds are there. My funds are there, and so on. And I'll go back to that in a little bit, because Westpath now has some options because of all the activism around divestment, and some of that activism's been resolutions. So it was a couple of years ago, I think 3 years ago, our Climate Justice Ministries Task Force in Cal, Nevada, put forth a resolution, an annual conference resolution to divest from fossil fuels. And I have a friend who happens to be the chair of the Board of Pensions, no, the staff person for the Board of Pensions in Cal, Nevada. And he talked to me about maybe having a summit instead, and to pull together all the financial agencies of the conference and have a big summit and try and get the financial people on board. And he wasn't insistent. We've passed other resolutions in Cal, Nevada. We've supported full divestment and so on, but not when it comes to our own pocketbooks, in our own annual conferences and our own financial leaders. That's a huge ask. So we did. And I'm sure there's a link there now posted about the summit that we held. It was a big job. Like with other resolutions, those of us who put forward the resolution had to follow up. So we were on the team, but the leadership of the team was the chair of the conference Committee on Finance and Administration. So we had all the financial agencies, and by the time we came around to, there was no opposition the next year to the resolution that we put forward that to divest our agencies from, or in the conference, from fossil fuels. That's one approach, because you've got two to choose from. One is to have a year of study. I encourage you strongly to make sure that it lists the financial agencies, to have them involved, because that's what did it. And but also another approach is CalPAC, and I saw that Lois Knowlton is here, and she's also on the board of Fossil Free, or the on our coordinating team of Fossil Free UMC. But she and her pastor that she introduced to the idea of conference divestment, they got on board with it. And it was past the time of, it was past due. I mean, their annual conference petitions, the deadline had passed. And so it was like, my thought was, you're just going to have to put forward the study for a year or something like that. But no, there was, Lois is pretty convincing. And evidently, Pastor Dement Christian Dement is pretty convincing too, because they had to have 10 signatures or 15 signatures to get it even approved. They got it approved past the deadline, and it passed overwhelmingly. It's amazing. You never know for sure, but there are different approaches, and you get to choose which approach you're going to take.
I'm going to jump in and just really quickly say we have about 2 minutes, Sharon. I know it's painful, but
no, it's not painful at all. I'm glad that's where I started. And the Desert Southwest and Pacific Northwest are also divested from fossil fuels. And I'm happy to hear that Mary Beth, that Mountain Sky is considering a divestment resolution also. By the way, net zero goes hand in hand with divestment, because in order to divest, or to get to net zero, that's like a foot in the door, because once you are really committed, if you're going to get to net zero, you're going to have to divest from fossil fuels. I mean, we are in the reality that scientists say we must phase out fossil fuels. That's the hard reality in which these conversations about divestment are taking place. We better be able to have those conversations, because that's the reality that we're being faced with. So, and we have the resources. And Pat, I'm with you. We can do this. We can pass the resolutions we need to pass to move toward a better future, for a good stand for the United Methodist Church, and for healing and wholeness for the world.
Amen. Amen. And another look at that book. The revised has the note that it's revised right at the bottom. It's not a big read. Your folks are going to be able to move through this book well. Lots of testimony. I think this is going to really help you. Okay, so it is time for us to move into breakout rooms. Karen, Pat, Sharon, and Mary Beth will all be hosting a room where you get a chance to share more And we really value that opportunity for you. And then we'll come back together at the very last, after about 12 minutes or so, and share a prayer and do our last things. Dawn, if you want to launch the rooms, you get to choose which room you want to go in. Here comes everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back from the great breakout rooms. Is there anybody who wants to share anything about the breakout room, or your experience, or anything you want to share about it? Go ahead, Mary Beth.
What I learned from Debbie and Susan was that we are all in different places, and that there is a need to start with task forces, just to get a task force as a first step. And it because it feels like people, they're what I heard was silos. What I heard, I need support to find what's happening with individual churches. We need the community building. So it feels to me like that is an important thing, of like the first step is get a task force. So I just am saying that out loud, because some of we are all in different places, and for the people who I talk with, they need help to get started. So, Pat, they're going to be calling on you. Anyway.
Awesome. Yeah. And Mary Beth, there's a request for your email in the chat if you're willing to share it. We are at time. One of the things we do, as I learned for good organizing in seminary, is you start on time and end on time. So I am going to thank everyone. Thank you to our presenters. Another shout out to this wonderful book that took real time, patience, and faithful commitment to write. And thank you, Sharon, for that crazy work. Also, Pat's book, The Climate Justice, Creation Justice, A Call to Hope and Action, is still just wonderfully full of stories. And in some ways, it'd be kind of a good, don't try to do too much. Don't try to do too much. But also there's Earth Keepers. That's another group of people to connect with when looking to start a task force. Who are the Earth Keepers in your conference? We did that in Oregon, Idaho, to good effect. I am at this point going to turn it over to Karen, who is going to pray us out. Go ahead, Karen.
Let's pray. Creator God, we thank you for this time together today, for the sharing of ideas, for the sharing of resources. Infuse us with the Holy Spirit. Guide us, help us to discern how we best serve our churches, our districts, our annual conferences in the work that we are so passionate about. Guide our steps as we go forth from this place today. In your Son's name we pray. Amen.